Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm going to be going over my top 5 baits for catching bass during the winter time. And yeah, let's get straight into it. So before we get started here, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you are new. I'm trying to post a video once a week. So when it comes to winter bass fishing, the water is going to get really cold. The fish are going to be in a really lethargic state. They're not going to be feeding in the same way that they're going to be feeding during the fall. So when it comes to winter, you need to really downsize your baits, slow down your fishing, and really think about what these fish are doing. So for me, these are my top 5 baits that I picked based on my success with them in the past. So I'm gonna go ahead and get straight into it, guys. I'm gonna start off at number 5 and work my way down to 1. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So number 5 on my list is going to be a plastic worm. Now, a plastic worm is something that you can fish many different ways, and it always catches fish year round. I like to fish plastic worms in the winter time on a Texas rig with a heavy weight on the end of it. And this right here is about a 6-inch curly-tailed worm from Zoom, and I have it on about a 1/0, 2/0 Gamakatsu hook on there. And this bait right here is awesome for the winter time, and the way I like to fish this is around structure or sometimes just straight off the bottom. I'll reel it in very slowly, give it a very slow retrieve, and oftentimes that's what it takes to get those fish to bite this time of year. Now, the way I like to fish a plastic worm in the winter time is with a 7-foot medium heavy fast action rod. That's my personal preference, and I'll fish this bait on 12 or 14 pound test, monofilament or fluorocarbon, whichever you prefer. And yeah, a plastic worm will get a lot of bites for those winter bass. Moving down to number 4 on my list is going to be a jig. This one in particular is a Strike King finesse jig, and this is in the black and blue color. And I'm gonna go ahead and link this as well as everything else in the video down in that description box if you guys want to go check that out and get these baits for yourself. This bait right here catches a lot of fish year round, but when it comes to winter, a lot of these bass are going to be hunkered down on the bottom and not very active, so you really have to match that behavior by fishing a bait that's going to entice those fish to bite. During the winter time, a lot of the bass are going to be nearby structure, deep structure, and this is a great way to target those fish. And a lot of times bass during the winter time are going to be feeding on craws. Craws are going to be on the bottom, and those bass are going to be sitting there just waiting for something to come by. If you have that jig sitting there on the bottom, and those claws are going to be sticking up towards those bass, and a lot of times that'll get those fish to pick it up. Now, I like to fish a jig on a 7-foot medium heavy fast action, just like the worm. I like to fish this on at least 12 pound test, monofilament or fluorocarbon. It's essentially the same exact setup that I throw the worm on. And keep in mind, this is a finesse jig, so I like to throw this on a lighter setup than I would fish a giant flipping jig on. Jig is always a great way to catch bass during the winter time. So yeah, on to the next bait. So like I've said before, when it comes to winter, these fish are going to be very lethargic and very lazy, and they're not going to want to chase after a bigger bait. And one way to really target those slow moving fish is with a really tiny presentation like a Ned rig. It's really simple, and it just always catches fish this time of year. I like to fish a Ned rig on the bottom and work it near structure, and a lot of times those slow lethargic fish, especially in the really cold winter months when it gets like into like the 30s, 40 degree water temp, those bass will not be willing to hit a bigger presentation like the jig or the worm. So you need to downsize and throw something really small like this Ned rig. So on this Ned rig, I have a little crawdad soft plastic on there with about 1/4 ounce jig head. Really simple setup. Anybody can use it and catch fish on it during the winter time. So moving down to number 2 on my list. This is one of my favorite baits to throw all year round, but especially during the winter time. This is a Underspin Swimbait. Now, what I have on here is a 3-inch Swimbait made by Reaction Innovation, linked in the description below. It's a really good little setup, and it catches fish year round, but especially during the winter months. And I actually caught a couple of fish on this bait in my last video. If you didn't see that, I caught a couple of nice bass on an Underspin. I like to fish it really slowly along the bottom, just kind of slow rolling it, and a lot of times that's what it takes this time of year. You can't work it too quickly. And it always tends to get bites during the winter. Now the setup I prefer to throw, a little Underspin setup like this, is going to be on a 7-foot. This is actually a 6'10", but a 6'10" medium heavy with a 6-to-8 to 1 gear ratio reel is my personal setup I use it on, and it just seems to do really well. I have 12-pound fluorocarbon line. A little swim bait like this will catch so many bass this time of year, and it always seems to get the job done. So moving down to number 1 on my list is going to be a jerkbait. Jerkbaits work well all year round, but especially when that water gets really cold. Most bass fishermen that I know love using jerkbaits during the winter time because, of course, those fish are not going to be very aggressive. If you know anything about jerkbait fishing, you know that you can give it like 30-second pauses, and that bait will just sit there suspended in the water column. Now, typically when I'm fishing a jerkbait in the winter time, or for any time of year, I'm going to be looking for schooled up bass and fishing it suspended, because you're not going to be able to get this bait down towards the bottom. So you want to kind of find, if you have like a fish finder or any kind of graph, you want to look for fish that are schooled up, suspended in the middle of the water column. This one in particular is a little Rapala. It's like a 5-foot diver. I like this thing for pond fishing because a lot of the ponds I fish are pretty shallow. Now the setup I like to throw a jerkbait on, for me, I prefer a medium action rod. This is a 7-foot medium action. And the reason I like a medium action rod is just because it's got a lot of bend to it, and when I jerk it, it's got a lot of give. It's gonna kind of sit there, but it's gonna jerk only a little bit. And if I have like a medium heavy, it's gonna kind of rip it farther, if that makes any sense. So a jerkbait is a great way to catch winter bass, especially when you're fishing deeper water. And that's why it makes #1 on my list. But when it comes to winter bass fishing, what it really comes down to is fishing slow and really being patient, because this time of year you're not going to get a lot of bites. You might catch 10 bass at a lake in the summertime in one day, and then go back there in the wintertime, you might not catch a single fish. So you really have to think about what those fish are going to be doing, and the way they're going to be behaving, and their feeding patterns. You don't want to fish too fast. Always downsize. These are all smaller presentations right here. The jig, the worm, the Ned rig, the jerkbait, the Swimbait. They're all downsized presentations, and they always get bites. And don't be afraid to try new things in the wintertime, because when it comes to cold water fishing, the bass are going to do things that you wouldn't expect. They're going to break the rules, and they're really going to confuse you sometimes as an angler. So you really have to get out there, just like grind it out, give it some effort, because you're not going to catch bass in the wintertime without persistence. Persistence is really key when it comes to cold water fishing for largemouth bass. So yeah, that's gonna wrap up the video, guys. I really hope you learned something. These are my top 5 winter bass fishing lures. You might have a few baits in mind that you catch a lot of fish on. If so, that's awesome. But for me, this is what does it. So this winter has been really interesting for me. I've only been able to get out and bass fish a couple of times since it's been so cold, and I definitely plan to do a lot of bass fishing this winter, and hopefully get on some big fish. 2021 is finally arriving. I'm super excited for next year. 2020 was undoubtedly one of my favorite years of fishing I've ever had in my life. I caught some amazing fish, I explored some amazing places, met some awesome people, and made some incredible memories. If you do enjoy the videos, if you did enjoy this one, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button. So I am trying to post once a week now. So yeah, 2021 is finally arriving. Look out for the next video. It's going to be a 2020 recap. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. We will see you in the next one.